So Batman 93 came out this week. I did a review of 92 recently that was well received video, so I figured I'd talk about this issue coming out. So when I talked about 92, I talked about the current story arc which is going on. So the reason I focused on issue 92, it was the first full appearance of Punchline, which is the Joker's new sidekick or partner, as she calls herself. She's basically a replacement Harlequin in the sense that, she's female clown themed like Harlequin, but the big difference between her is that she's not funny. Despite, her name, the Punchline, she's not even trying to be funny. She's just pretty much just 100% psychopath with no sense of humor. Which, of course, the Joker loves just because for him, psychopathy is the best humor. So anyway, let's see, issue 92 was part 7 of I think what's supposed to be a 10-part story arc. And it's not really focusing on the Joker. It's focusing on this character called the Designer, who's another mastermind character who's organizing all of these different villains in Gotham to bring Batman down. And I talked about this in my last video, where that was the kind of the thing I didn't like about this series. It's very well written. In fact, it's one of the better written Batman stories I've read in a long time. But this idea that there's another mastermind who's orchestrating all these villains to bring down Batman again, it's too much like Hush. It's too much like Nightfall. We've been there, done that. So well written, just not an original idea. However, this issue, I don't want to say it turns that on the head, but it gives it a twist that justifies its existence. So fair warning, at this point, I'm going to talk about spoilers for issue 93. And if you haven't read this issue or you haven't read this story arc yet and you don't want to be spoiled, you definitely don't want to watch this video, because issue 93 is a real turning point issue in the story. So I'll summarize the plot of this series. And I'll give you the story by telling it sequentially, which is actually not how the story comes out in the comic. It's this whole backstory, which you learn later, but I'm going to start with the backstory. The backstory is, there's this supervillain called the Designer, and the Designer was the supervillain that no one knew about. He was the grand mastermind who would orchestrate all these really elaborate crimes that no one had ever heard of. Basically, it's kind of like the man behind the curtains sort of thing. If you've watched the new James Bond movies, think about kind of the way they portrayed Spectre as this organization that manipulated all these other ones like Quantum and all these other groups. So he's kind of like, he's that guy. He's a super villain version of that guy. So he comes to Gotham early in Batman's career, and he approaches the 4 most notorious Batman villains at that time, which are the Joker, Riddler, Catwoman, and the Penguin, and says that he can basically make all their dreams come true. He can give them what they want. Then he talks about how he has this whole backstory where he had defeated someone like Batman in a previous life, giving you the impression this Designer is probably like a really old character who probably fought some of the Golden Age heroes. So he has a private meeting with all 4. Well, he has a private dinner, I should say, with all 4. Basically kind of gives them an overview of his plan, but then he wants to talk to each one of them individually, so he pulls them in a side room and goes over like what their individual role in this quote grand design would be. So the last person he has the conversation with is Joker. So he goes in with Joker, and they're in there for a few hours, and the other, Catwoman and Penguin, all of them are waiting outside going, well, what's taking so long? Suddenly, the Designer busts out of the room, and he tells his minions to kill them all, kill all 4 of them. Like, the whole plan's off. Well, not surprising, since all 4 of those characters are Batman stable characters, they don't get killed. In fact, they kill the Designer in return. So the question is what went wrong in that conversation with the Joker? Which we don't really learn. But whatever happened with his conversation with the Joker, he just totally changed his mind and decided he wanted all 4 of those villains dead. So they all 4 go their own ways. Of course, have many more Batman adventures. Now, at this point in the Batman comic, if you've kept up with Batman at all in this last couple of years, they've basically done a complete turn on Catwoman. She's basically 100% hero now. Kind of more and more of an anti-hero, but the idea is that, she knows who Batman is. She knows it's Bruce Wayne, and they're in love. They've been dating for a while now. They actually got engaged. The marriage got called off, but they're still in a relationship. So she's part of the Bat family now. So anyway, the story opens. I'm not talking about issue 93. I'm talking about the story arc. The story opens with 5 super assassins coming to Gotham. And that's a red flag to those 4 villains, Joker, Catwoman, all of them, because they remember the grand design was going to start with 5 top assassins that were not native to Gotham coming to Gotham to execute the plan. And so they realize the Designer is back. He's moving forward, but he's moving forward without their help. And since they supposedly had killed him, obviously he's going to target them too. So he executes his plan to take out Batman. He does pull Riddler into his plan, like the Riddler's going to help him do what he was originally going to do, but he sends people out to kill Penguin. Unclear his plans for the Joker. The Joker seems to have his whole other thing going on, like Penguin and Catwoman and Riddler are worried about the designer being back, but Joker doesn't seem to care. Well, he does seem to care, but he doesn't seem worried. He's cleaning up his house, so to speak, where he's killing off a bunch of his hitmen that work for him. He's redoing his whole clown organization. So he's got something going on. Now, since Catwoman is Batman's girlfriend, she naturally tells him about the meeting with the designer, tells him everything she knows about the plan. Of course, she doesn't know everything, but she has an idea, and it's enough to, of course, give Batman a leg up and defeating the designer. So in issue 93, Batman finally confronts the designer. Issue 92, it ended with Harlequin and Punchline fighting, while Catwoman went ahead to execute her part of the grand design plan. Now, why would she do that? Obviously, now she's a good guy, and she doesn't want to hurt Batman. Her part of the plan was basically to steal the Wayne fortune. And she decides she's going to go ahead and do that because what she figures is that it means the grand designer has got a plan to do it that no longer involves her. So she's afraid that, her lover is going to lose his millions, or his billions rather. So she figures the only way to safeguard it is to be the one to steal it herself. And their whole meeting with Punchline came about that apparently Punchline was also trying to execute that plan to hack into the accounts and steal them all. But Harlequin was teaming up with Catgirl. They ran into Punchline, so Punchline and Harlequin start fighting, and Catgirl sneaks off with this sort of evil mastermind stockbroker who can help her hack into these accounts. Meanwhile, Batman starts dueling with the designer, so he's apparently not just your typical mastermind guy who's all flash and no substance. He's actually apparently really good at the sword, so they have a nice, really cool duel. But then we get to the big twist. Batman ends up defeating the designer in the duel, and he's talking to the designer like how he's figured out all his plans and everything, and then he unmasks the designer, and the designer is a corpse. Now, it's worth mentioning that we had already seen at this point the designer uses animated corpses as sort of a hitman and sort of bodyguards, things like that. So it's not surprising he has that technology. So apparently that's not really the designer, but it's, of course, this person has a designer's voice. So he's thinking like he's just using this sort of zombie as sort of like a drone, so to speak, where he's controlling him and talking to Batman, but he's not actually there, he's somewhere else. Big twist turns out that no, the designer apparently really is dead, and that the Joker is controlling this designer zombie. Added to that, this whole thing with Catwoman going in to hack Bruce Wayne's accounts was actually part of the setup. Punchline was there not to stop Catwoman from doing it and to hack it herself. She was actually there to let Catwoman hack it because she knew that Catwoman could get in, but she probably couldn't. But it turns out all the terminals she's using are like dummy terminals. So really what she's doing is she's just, it's kind of like if you've ever seen Michael Douglas's The Game, that scene where he gets conned into basically giving up his passwords for all his bank account. And that's what kind of happened here, where, basically the Catwoman typed in all of this secret information she had on Bruce Wayne's accounts. So now they had the information how to hack it, and they knock her unconscious, throw her in a ditch, so to speak, and they take all of Bruce Wayne's money. Now, the writer here does something really cool. So we saw this actually with Batman Dark Knight Rises and the Christopher Nolan movies, where Bane bought into Bruce Wayne's accounts via Wall Street and redistributes his funds in such a way that basically causes Bruce Wayne to lose everything. While kind of cool for a 2-hour movie, the concept of stealing a fortune that way would not work. Especially because it was pretty obvious what happened. Bane breaks into Wall Street in broad daylight in front of everybody. Everyone pretty much knows what's happening. They know that Bruce Wayne's money has been hijacked by Bane. Federals and whatnot, they could get in, they could shut that down. He's not really going to lose all his money. But the writer of the Batman comic finds a way to explain it that makes a lot of sense. Basically, what he's saying is that Bruce Wayne technically doesn't own anything. That he's created all these shell companies, which he controls. The shell companies control his fortune. Now, the reason for doing that is because by having all these different shell companies, that allows him to move his fortune around as he needs to, and he can finance his Batman empire without anyone being able to trace it. If his accounts were to ever be hacked, in order to get his money back, he'd have to get the feds involved. And people would start poking around to his accounts to start to realize all the irregularities, so it basically would risk exposing him as Batman. The implication is that if his accounts ever do get hacked, he's going to just have to let the money go. So it's part of the reason, of course, Catwoman was wanting to be the one to do it, because if she hacked it, she knew she could basically give the money back, and no one's going to be any the wiser. But now the Joker has Batman's billions, and Batman has no way to get that money back without revealing his identity. We also learned in issue 92, actually, no, not issue 92, but one of the earlier issues in this series, that Joker actually knows the identity of Batman and every member of the Bat family. So what we actually learned from issue 93 is that this whole story arc, this whole 10-part thing, is actually just setting the stage for a big Joker story that comes next. It's going to be, I think, 5 parts, not kind of crossovers. I don't know if there are crossovers. But issue 95 through 100 will be called the Joker War. And it's going to be this major big Batman event. So, kind of a cool twist, but it's at the same time it's disappointing that this whole story arc was all just a bunch of setup. And it wasn't even like it was a good story, despite its lack of originality for much of it. It was a good story and very enjoyable. But now it's just all fluff. Not really a complaint, just a slight disappointment. I am looking forward to seeing this Joker War, though. So I think it'll be pretty hot. Who knows what cool thing they're going to do in it. So I would definitely say if you're a Batman fan, or even if you just kind of like Batman and want a good comic to read. I was up at the comic shops today and looking around, and Marvel's finally putting some books out, but they did not have much. I was very underwhelmed by Marvel's selection. So, and as I said in several videos at this point, it's pretty much just all about DC right now. They're the ones who want to make good comics. They're the ones that are making good comics, and they're the ones that are looking to the future. So, just say if you like superhero comics, it's time to get on the DC train, man. That's all I can say. All right, I appreciate you watching this video. That's it for now, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.